Welcome to a new episode of TTG Conversations 5 Questions video series. I'm Karen Yu, Group Editor of TTG Asia Media. In this episode, we will look at how Asia Pacific business travelers are traveling, and we will discuss some of the findings of BCD Travel's latest global survey. Now, taking us through this topic is Amitava Lahiri, Director of Program Management for Asia Pacific with BCD Travel. It's great having you here, Amit.
Thank you so much for having me in this conversation. And it is such an interesting subject for all of us in BCD.
Yeah, because we are all travelers ourselves, aren't we?
Thank you. Absolutely. And with our tech-driven and our customer-centric approach that we have in our organization, this survey is very important to us as it opens up some of very often overlooked areas like the hotel loyalty gap that we observe in our region, the hesitation in combining corporate and business trip together for leisure. We call it Bleisure in our language. And we also observe a certain amount of minimum companion travel, which is prevalent in our Western counterpart, and certain sustainability blind spots also. So this survey has opened up a lot of areas for us.
Do you want to talk about some of the interesting findings in the Asia Pacific market? Just talk about some of the interesting findings that you have.
Sure. So let me start off with our loyalty gap, the hotel loyalty gap that we talk about. It represents a very complex business challenge that initially appears to us, it is very straightforward, but it has a very complex interplay of cultural, structural, and other market-driven factors, which we often overlook. So if I may go one by one, for example, if I divide it into three primary areas, one of them would be the fragmented market and the fragmented loyalty. Let me put it this way. Unlike our North American and European counterparts and markets, our people in Asia Pacific or the hotel chains doesn't have a dominant or a major hotel groups blanketing the map overall in Asia Pacific. Instead, we have got a wild ecosystem of global hotel chains. We have strong regional players and even bigger mix of local high quality independent hotels. Now, that fragmentation makes it harder for any single loyalty program to become the default loyalty program for our corporates. This is one area we keep on observing. The second area is our policy and price-driven behavior. This is very unique to Asia Pacific. Cost control in most of our Asian corporate is the king. And it is the prime motivator for any hotel booking or consumption that we say. So travelers, they don't often go and pick their hotels because they wanted to, or it is part of their, loyalty program, but it is governed by policy or the travel behavior. So the traveler prioritizes cost over brand. Also, sometimes the ecosystem which present in Asia Pacific, it offers deep discounts and cashback, which can dilute the overall perceived value of a loyalty program as well. So that one area, and it tied up to the other, which is the cultural travel behavior. Business travelers in our Asia Pacific regions aren't really fixated on maximizing points, which we usually observe in Europe and Asia Pacific region. So it is catching up, of course, but we are still more compliant on policy-driven hotel bookings and less on the psychology of loyalty program based on that I'm a platinum status or I'm a gold status. So that differs from geography to geography.
I see.
Okay. And the last area is our digital ecosystem. Sometime more than our loyalty platform, it is the ecosystem, or we call the super app platform, like we have in Asia Pacific, Grab, WeChat. It creates an integrated travel services platform. So travelers in many countries like China, Japan, India, instead of tied down by loyalty of a hotel, they are tied down by the platform. So these are 3, 4 areas we observe as a gap. And it is not that the program doesn't exist. The concept of hotel loyalty program came to Asia a bit later, towards the late 90s, but they're actually very mature program and pretty strong in our region. But it is because of this corporate consumer behavior, our cultural norms and booking channels that exist in our market, it makes them less sticky.
Mm.
I've answered this question.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Now, another observation in your study that really stood out for me was the low level of leisure extensions and companion travel among Asia Pacific business travelers. Now, personally, I don't practice that. I don't really extend because of TTG's projects are usually back to back, and but for most of the travelers, I would expect that they would take advantage of the time when they're overseas for work to extend it because we're all about maximizing time, isn't it? So why are they not looking into leisure extensions? Is it a cultural effect or is it due mostly to very strict corporate travel policies?
Um, that's a great question because you have nailed one of the paradoxes of business travel in Asia Pacific. Okay. In theory, Bleisure, which is business plus leisure, should be a win-win, you know, where the employees get more satisfaction, companies get friendly and happy employees, I will put it this way, more engaged employee, but the actual adoption is way lower than Europe or US market.
Mhm.
Now, you correctly pointed it out. It's a cultural and mindset, the
Okay.
number one factor which drives it. Because in our cultural way of working, work and personal life are more sharply demarcated. Number one. In our business trips are often we see them as a serious assignments, not some parks used for personal benefit. Okay. There is also the sense that, lingering after business is done might signal a lack of, a little bit of dedication, or might be people talking in contrast to the theme and understanding. So that comes very top of the line when we think about Bleisure in Asia Pacific. Secondly, as we pointed out in my previous answer, is the company policy and control. Okay. APEC corporates tend to be conservative about travel policy. Adding leisure extension or a companion introduces high risk. It's a higher cost, then there is insurance, responsibility. And in our Asia Pacific way of working, I would say our legal and PNC, people and culture, they do not like gray areas. Okay.
Mm.
So because of that, multinational headquartered in the West might allow it globally. But when it comes to Asia Pacific, the local subsidiaries, the markets, the countries often tighten the screws to avoid complications.
Mhm.
And last is the family and social structure. Um, it clashes somehow in our social norm because in many Asian culture, family, commitment, kids, parents, household, these obligations are often prioritized. Okay. Now, add to that visa requirement, which has become stricter and stricter over the years, it makes it harder for leisure to happen. But there are silver lining. For example, the tide is shifting. We can see that the data is showing us that. Younger APEC employees in Asia Pacific region, the millennials and the Generation Z, they are pushing the boundaries for flexible work environment. And the companies are more sensitive to employees' mental health. Now,
Mm.
the interesting experiment, the thought process that we are having, because in BCD we always talk about next generation, is that can, as an organization, companies can reframe the leisure as an employee benefit that
Mm.
formalized with clear cost control and duty of care. And it might reduce the loyalty gap, which we talked on our previous question,
Mm.
and boost employee happiness. So maybe another few years, we will see it completely taking up.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I agree because even in my team, the younger ones are the ones that are asking for extensions,
Mhm.
and they're maximizing their time when they go on business trips, and they're also looking at more flexible remote work where they can just function anywhere in the world wherever they are.
True.
So that's going to happen. Yes. Okay, let's talk about sustainability, which is also another interesting observation in your study. Sustainability blind spots among Asia Pacific business travelers is concerning, when more and more companies are recognizing and actively managing scope 3 emissions. So why aren't, Asia Pacific business travelers prioritizing sustainable travel options?
Um, you know, Actually, APEC corporates are loudly aligning and taking pledges about scope 3 emissions. They are, because sustainability is a buzzword and it is the area we need to look at because we are all trying to save our earth. Yet, when you zoom down to individual traveler level, sustainability often drops down to the bottom of the checklist. Now, why? Again, it's a mix of cultural, economic blind spot which comes in, and if I have to explain it this way, there's policy versus practice gap. So, for example, at the corporate level, sustainability is an increasingly important concept and component in our corporate boardrooms as a KPI, as an indicator. However, this does not automatically translate to the employee's travel booking. The reason is, procurement teams actively negotiate and supplies greener options for the travelers to book their hotels and air. But when the business leaders and travelers are pressed for price, guidelines, policy, travel policy, often convenience and compatibility takes precedence. That the traveler says, I want to take an 8 a.m. flight instead of a 4 a.m. flight. Consequently, sustainability rarely appears as a mandatory requirement till today in our booking tool, resulting in its invisibility. That is one of the bigger challenge. The second one is awareness and availability. So in APAC markets, sustainable travel options are not as clearly visible or standardized as Europe or US, primarily Europe at this point of time, where hotels and airlines, especially airlines talk about SAF, right? The sustainable aviation fuel and the other initiative, rail as a strong alternative in European market. Hotel display the certification, the EcoVadis and all certifications. In APAC, apart from a few airlines and suppliers and hotels, green choices are patchy and it's kind of inconsistently marketed. We have to do better in that. And if you don't see an option, you don't prioritize it. So that is one thing which is bothering us in the Asia Pacific market. And the last is the price sensitivity, of course. Again, as we say that, companies are laser focused on cost. When you look into the sustainable flights or eco-certified hotel option, they are comparatively expensive, even today. Hence, in procurement-led travel business, where lowest logical fare is the buzzword and they always win, sustainability, unless mandated, it becomes a luxury consideration and it takes a backseat. So this blind spot, as we discussed, corporate board wants scope 3 reduction, procurement focuses on cost, and travelers are left with little incentive. So these three kind of push each other out, but it is changing and we are progressing with more stricter control on sustainability.
Now let's review those things that you mentioned, the loyalty gap, the lack of Bleisure travel as a perk, and also the sustainability issue. So these findings of major concern for your average corporate travel manager?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So these 4 areas that we highlighted, loyalty gap, Bleisure, sustainability, and cultural rigidities, these are not only, we call it the curiosities of corporate travel. No, these are the fault lines, okay? And it exists today. From our perspective, we at BCD being a very technology-driven and human-centric, there are a couple of areas we keep on talking for the travel managers. So for a travel leaders, the challenge is running a program that is efficient on paper, number one. But at the same time, we know that it is brittle because unhappy employees miss sustainability goals, weak supply leverage. So when you look into this, we talk about 4 areas. When you talk about hotel loyalty, let us leverage and use the traveler satisfaction as a tool. Let's rationalize the supplier base, book more online booking tool, make use of more online booking tool, and then formalize the Bleisure framework. Today, that framework is somewhat translucent. We need to make it very transparent for the travelers and then communicate policy as an empowerment, which is very, very critical. And once these 3-4 areas are being taken care of, the mindset is not to squeeze harder, but to balance smarter all these 4 areas. And we will see a remarkable change in the whole engagement that we have today.
One more question, Amit. Is there anything that the supplier side, the hotels, the airlines, and other suppliers can do to ensure that the corporate travel program can be optimized and addresses all these fault lines that you've identified in your study?
Yes, I believe both the airlines and the hotels, we tell them as our suppliers, we can look into a default green nudge in across Asia Pacific market. When you say nudge, set a standard procedure, have a transparency about, say, carbon emission indicators, about the hotel, highlighting their capability of platinum REIT platform that the hotels usually say, and communicate more openly with suppliers like us, the TMCs, and also with our clients, so that it's create a win-win framework for all of us. Once we have those in place, I think we are looking forward to a bright future for all of us.
Okay, great. And that's all the questions I have for you, Amit. Thank you so much for being on this episode.
Thank you, Karen, so much, and thank you for having me.
Past and future episodes of TTG Conversations 5 Questions can be found on the TTG YouTube channel. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye.